Hi, everyone. Miss Forster here. Okay, let's look at the agenda. Okay, great. So, great, I know I'm sharing my screen. Okay, today you've already done your vocab.com. Hopefully, you're able to join the class. If you could not join the class, you can practice the list in the meanwhile, but if you send me an email, I'll try to send you a link by the end of the week, hopefully by tomorrow. I'm back to school. Okay, so next we're going to have an opening discussion about Frankenstein. First, we're going to talk about Mary Shelley, and we are going to look at her life and how it might relate to Frankenstein. Then we can take a little 5-minute break. Sorry, Mary Shelley, then more of an introduction to the book, the themes, and the way it's told. Then a 5-minute break you guys can take, and then we'll do a science fiction introduction video, which is interesting because Frankenstein is one of the first, or sort of like one of the most foundational science fiction texts. So it's very exciting. Great. So at this time, if we haven't already, let's pass out the worksheets. They're going to look like this. You're going to have a timeline of Mary Shelley's life on the front, and then on the back, it'll be some notes for the science fiction video you're going to do a little bit later. Okay. So first, turn to this front side with the map. I'm going to take some notes on OneNote so you can see. And then you guys will follow along. Okay. So in 1797, we're just going to go over this, and then I'm going to take a few more notes, and I would like you to write along with me the extra notes that I put in. So first of all, it says this, right? When it says this, this image was a part of a larger presentation. What they mean by this is the book Frankenstein. So Frankenstein reflected the death and depression in Mary Shelley's own life. In 1797, there was the death of her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, 10 days after her birth. What a bummer. Mom dies due to an infection that happened during childbirth. And at this time, Mary Shelley is actually known as Mary Wollstonecraft, Godwin. There we go. So that's her full name at this time. Obviously, she gets married later on, and that's how her name changes. In July of 1814, so she'd be 17 at this point, right? Math. After a brief courtship, Mary elopes with the married poet Percy Shelley, and her father disowns her for several years. That was probably an awkward Christmas. Then we go to February of 1815, just a little later, and her daughter is born prematurely and dies after 13 days. Okay, so we have already had 2 deaths so far. Death of the mother, death of the first child. Then we go on to, let's start with October 1816, because that would come before December. So in October, her sister Fanny Imlay kills herself with a laudanum overdose at the age of 22. That would be death number 3. Then we have in December of 1816, Percy Shelley, which is her eloped husband, his wife, Harriet, the one he was married to before Mary, drowns herself by jumping in the Serpentine in London. She is 21 and pregnant, which means that is not 1, but 2 more deaths. So many deaths. In January of 1817, Mary's half-sister Claire has an illegitimate child, Allegra. Lord Byron acknowledges himself the father, who it is possibly Shelley's. This is so strange. Oh my goodness. Claire and Mary, they're half sisters, and they kind of fight over men. There is some like rumors that Lord Byron and Mary Shelley also had an affair. Okay, but here's the big thing. In here, Mary Shelley writes Frankenstein. So let's go to the bottom and just take a little brief note on that. It's in 1816 that Mary Shelley, I'll just call her MS, she travels to Geneva for a little vacay. Now, they're traveling to stay at the house of Lord Byron. Okay, so they stay at the house of Lord Byron. And also on this trip is her husband, Percy. Both of these guys are famous writers of the Romantic period. Now, while they are there in Byron's villa, maybe I'll put this right here, Byron's villa, they're sitting around by the campfire one night and they're telling German ghost stories. They told German ghost stories. And then they say, hey, let's each write one. Mary Shelley has trouble coming up with one at first. And at a certain point, they're saying, like, okay, what's your idea, Mary? What's your idea, Mary? And she goes, I don't have one yet. But then far after everyone has gone to bed, it's late at night, and she has what she later calls a waking vision. Sorry, a waking dream. It kind of reminds me of like a vision or a daydream. And this vision is of a student trying to reanimate a corpse. And if that is not the story of Frankenstein, I don't know what is. Frankenstein really is about a somewhat mad scientist, overambitious, maybe I'll call him scientist, who tries to bring a dead body to life, a patched together dead body. Okay, so those are the good times at Byron's villa in Geneva. Continuing on, the first time this book is published is actually in 1818. Okay, so she continues to write the book in 1817, and then she publishes the first version in 1818, which is the version we read. She later made edits to it and published it again, and that might be even the more well-read version, which is a version that was published after her husband dies over here in 1822. The thing is that that version of the book puts the male characters in the book, in kind of a kinder light than it shows them in a kinder light than she does in 1818. In 1818, they're a little bit more selfish and a little bit harsher of characters, which seems a little bit more true to her life at the time, which is one of the reasons that we read it, the 1818 version, is because we like hearing about what her experience was right at that time when she wrote it, and not what seems to be her like self-censored version of trying to be nice to her husband-like characters in the book. Okay, 1818, Mary's daughter Clara dies at the age of 1. That's another dead child. At 1819, her son William dies of malaria. She is childless for 5 fateful months. So that's the third child that has now died. And then she finally has her only surviving child ever, Percy Florence. Okay. So, in 1821, Dr. John Polidori, fellow guest at the Villa Diodati, and perhaps an unrequited lover of Mary, kills himself at London at the age of 25. another death of someone we know. Then we have Mary almost dies after a serious miscarriage, which means that's another child that has died. So out of 5 children, 4 of them die. This is truly one of the most depressing lives I've ever heard of. Then her husband Percy drowns in a boating accident at the age of 29. I wasn't that big of a fan of him anyway, because he was married before he eloped with Mary. So anyway, but you know, he dies. Very sad. And then finally, Lord Byron dies at the age of 36 in Greece. Now, even more finally than that, when does Mary Shelley die? She dies in 1851, and she dies, although MS, dies of what we think is a brain tumor. Science is not at its absolute best at the time, but that is the assumption. Okay, so that's going to be our Mary Shelley notes. Now, everyone go ahead and take a moment and take out your book. Go ahead and take out your book. You should have brought your book today. There was supposed to be a book check. I will be checking the book on Friday. I will be checking the book on Friday. Okay. Okay. Now, I want you to pretend for these notes that the very front cover page, so you have, you can look at me bigger for a moment, or can't I? Let's see. Oh, I can. Okay, so let's pretend that this, I'm wanting you to write, we're going to write themes, the things we're annotating for over here, and then we're going to write the rest of our notes over here. Okay, so I'll tell you when we're flipping sides. Open up the front cover of your book. Boop. First of all, if you haven't already, write your name in pen in the front cover of your book. Then what you need to do is we're going to go over our themes, right? So our first theme is going to be, crazy, is going to be, we're going to annotate it using a B and an I, and it is the belonging versus isolation. What does it mean to belong, and what does it mean to be isolated? How do we self-isolate? And how do we cause rifts that don't allow us to belong anymore? And what are the characters that want to belong but can't because they look a certain way or act a certain way? Okay, then we have, of course, the absence You know what? I lied. We're not doing this one this year. I just remembered that. I'm so sorry. Here we go. Okay. Then we have the loss of innocence. Okay. Tale as old as time. You have done this in Lord of the Flies, and probably every other book forever. The loss of innocence. As we grow, we lose the naivete that we had as a child. And even more so in this book, it's like kind of more about losing our innocence in that we start to understand that the world has dying and death. Okay, which reminds me of the macabre, by the way. All right, then we have this thing called the double. Now I'm also going to do a slash and remind myself that it also means paradox. I'm going to give you a definition for this one because this is a pretty new one. This is the idea, we're going to treat it as the idea of the alter ego, meaning a second side of yourself, a darker side of yourself that you don't know, or the psychic counterpart to a person Or we can even look at it as like a foil, okay? Which would be multiple characters that either mirror each other, reflect each other, or are opposites, okay? A foil is probably a term you should have learned already in literature if you have not already, but basically it's the two characters that usually are enemies or they're just opposites of each other. I'm trying to think of one right now. My brain is failing me. I guess if I were to have to choose one, I would say maybe Romeo and Tybalt would be foils. There's a really good foil in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. In Lord of the Flies, it would be Jack and Ralph. Those two are foils. They have like one seems like the alter ego to the other person. They are like the opposite of each other. Okay, so that's the double. And then last but not least, we have Promethean Ambition. The subtitle of this book is The Modern Prometheus. Okay, it's called Frankenstein or The Modern Prometheus. We'll talk more about who Prometheus is later, but Promethean Ambition it has to do with this desire for control that we've been talking about. It's basically this idea of having too much ambition or a desire to play God. Now we'll add on to that definition later on, but for now this will do. Okay, now you're gonna switch. Whoops, what's that? You're gonna switch to the next page. Okay. Now here's where it gets fun. Okay, so do we remember the frame tale? The answer is yes. We remember what a frame tale is. So this frame tale is even more framey than the Ancient Mariner. In the Ancient Mariner, we had Rime of the Ancient Mariner. We had one frame, and then we had our main story. In this story, we have one frame, two frame, another frame, and a final story. Okay, so I'm going to label these for you, and then as you read, you'll kind of notice when we start jumping frames. This is called Captain Walton's story. His name is Captain Robert Walton, if you want to write that in. Okay. Then, as Captain Walton is telling his story of how amazing his time at sea has been and his exploratory adventures, he remarks on this person that he met, whose name is Victor. Frankenstein. Victor's story. This is Victor Frankenstein's story. And then we jump into Victor's story and we don't hear about Robert Walton anymore. We just hear about Victor. Then as Victor is talking, he touches upon the creature and then we don't hear about Victor anymore. We only hear about the creature's story. And finally, the creature starts talking about the DeLacy's. Never remember this. DeLacy's. And that's like the final inception. And then we'll go out, back to Captain Robert Walton at the end. So these beginning letters are written from Captain Robert Walton to his sister. So the letters that you're going to read today at the end of class, whoops, that does happen, are going to be from Robert Walton, letters 1 through 4. Then all of this, whoop, that wasn't very good, sorry. All of that is going to be volume 1, 1 through 2, and volume 2, chapters 1 through 12. Oh, I messed this up. I'm sorry. This isn't 1 through 2. This is 1 through 11. Couldn't even read my own writing. There we go. That's what it is. Okay. Last but not least, at the very end, we go back to Captain Robert's story and we have the final letters. They are not numbered. Not numbered. Okay. The last little note that I need to leave you is that some of you have a different version than I have, and that's fine. I have the Seawolf Press edition. That's the one with the monster bursting through a brick wall on the front. That's the one I will be going off of. I recommend that you get this book because it's just easier to follow along. But if you don't have it, then the only problem is that, how do I get rid of this thing? There we go. The only problem is that this bit is actually broken up differently. So if you have Seawolf Press, it's like this. But if you have the Simon & Schuster version, that's going to be separated into volume 1, volume 2, and volume 3. And it goes 1 to 7, 1 to 9, and 1 to 7. So it just gets kind of confusing when we're talking about the quizzes. I'll be like, okay, so we're doing a quiz tomorrow on volume 1, chapter 2, or volume 1, chapter 9. But then for you, it'll be volume 2, chapter 2, something like that. Okay? That's where it gets kind of weird. Okay. That is the main notes that you need to take. Keep your pencil out though, because you'll take a break and then you'll be reading or watching the video on the sci-fi. But one more thing I need to warn you about. It is important during this unit, the Frankenstein unit, that you are reading and taking notes. And the way that I want to go about this is if you have a question for class, I want you to come in and bring me a page number that you are confused about, okay? Come in, bring the page number that you are confused about, and then we will talk about it as a class. What event is happening, or who is this person? I don't really have a clear grasp on who that is, or what does she mean when the author's talking about this thing on this page, okay? The questions I don't want are, hey, I heard from the last class that the quiz is on this. Can you tell me about that? What I want you to be doing is being responsible for your reading and really reading and figuring out what it is that you don't know, rather than just prepping for the quizzes. That being said, there is a quiz almost every single day of this unit. So you have to read so that you can perform well on the quizzes. On the bright side, at the end, we will have a quiz corrections opportunity so that if you miss a lot of points on quizzes, you can make some of them up with the quiz corrections. And in the end, quizzes are trying to prep you for the unit test because there are a lot of events in this book. So that is the reason that we take reading it pretty seriously. Great. You guys, this book has some of the most fruitful conversations of any book in high school ever. And I'm very excited to go on that journey with you. Okay. That being said, go take a 5-minute break. You can go to the bathroom, wash your hands, do whatever you want. Just make sure you're respectful in the hallway. And I'm going to put up that 5-minute timer right now in this video. And then you should be back by the end of the 5 minutes.